Hello everyone, this is The Historiographer. Today, the life and times of Saddam Hussein, one of history's most famous dictators, will be explored. Saddam Hussein was born to a prominent Sunni Muslim family on April 28, 1937, in Tikrit in the then Hashemite Kingdom of Iraq. His father died months before Saddam was born, and a few months later, Saddam's older brother died of cancer. The bad family situation of Saddam's mother, who was severely depressed by her losses and hence unable to take care of him, was a catalyst for the mother's decision to marry and send the young boy of 3 to his uncle Khairallah Talfah in Baghdad. Years later, Saddam would return to Tikrit to live with his mother, but after suffering abuse at the hands of his stepfather, he fled to Baghdad at around the age of 10 to again live with his uncle, a devout Sunni Muslim and an ardent Arab nationalist whose politics would have a profound influence on the young Saddam. His uncle saw in the young boy great potential and encouraged him to pursue his studies. After attending an Arab nationalist secondary school in Baghdad, the 20-year-old Saddam, influenced by his uncle and the then president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, joined the Ba'ath Party founded by the Syrian Michel Aflaq in 1957, whose ultimate ideological aim was the unity of the Arab states in the Middle East. During this period, Saddam became infamous as a political agitator who opposed the ruling government of the First Republic of Iraq led by the Prime Minister Abdel Karim Qasim, who had overthrown the Hashemite king. Indeed, in 1959, Saddam and other members of the Ba'ath Party attempted to assassinate Qasim due to his resistance to joining the nascent United Arab Republic, as well as his alliance with the Communist Party, which had put him at odds with the Baathists. During the assassination attempt, Qasim was shot several times, but he survived, while Saddam was shot in the leg. Several conspirators were caught, tried, and executed. Yet, Saddam managed to escape to Syria, where he stayed briefly before fleeing to Egypt in 1960, in which he attended law school in Cairo. In 1963, when Qasim's government was overthrown by the Ba'ath coalition of the Iraqi president Abdurrahman Arif and his prime minister Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, Saddam returned to Iraq, but he was arrested the following year as a result of the infighting between the Ba'ath Party. After fleeing from prison, Saddam participated in a bloodless but successful coup in 1968 that resulted in Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr becoming Iraq's president and Saddam his deputy, as well as deputy chairman of the Ba'athist Revolutionary Command Council. During al-Bakr's presidency, Saddam proved himself to be an effective and progressive politician, albeit a ruthless one. Saddam's chief focus as deputy chairman was stability in a nation riddled with profound tensions. Long before Saddam, Iraq had been split along social, ethnic, and economic fault lines: Sunni versus Shiite, Arab versus Kurd, and tribal chief versus urban merchant. The desire for stable rule in a country rife with factionalism led Saddam to pursue a policy of both massive repression and the improvement of living standards. Truly, Saddam actively fostered the modernization of the Iraqi economy, along with the creation of a strong security apparatus to prevent coups within the power structure. Ever concerned with broadening his base of support among the diverse elements of Iraqi society and mobilizing mass support, he closely followed the administration of state welfare and development programs. At the center of his strategy was Iraq's oil. In 1972, influenced by Nasser's nationalization of the Suez Canal in 1956, Saddam nationalized Iraqi oil. In a stroke of luck, just a year later, world oil prices would rise dramatically as a result of the 1973 energy crisis, and skyrocketing revenues enabled Saddam to expand his agenda. Within just a few years, Iraq was providing social services that were unprecedented amongst countries in the Middle East. For example, Saddam established and controlled the National Campaign for the Eradication of Literacy and the Campaign for Compulsory Free Education in Iraq, and largely under his auspices, the government established universal free schooling up to the highest education levels. Anyone found not attending illiteracy eradication classes was imprisoned. As a result, hundreds of thousands learned to read in the years following the initiation of the program. Iraq further created one of the most modernized public health systems in the Middle East, earning Saddam an award from the UNESCO. With the help of increasing oil revenues, Saddam also diversified the Iraqi economy. The second-in-command also implemented a national infrastructure campaign that made great progress in building roads, promoting mining, and developing other industries. The campaign helped Iraq's energy industries, and electricity was brought to nearly every city in the country. Before the 70s, most of Iraq's people lived in the countryside, and roughly 2/3 were peasants. This number would decrease quickly during the 70s as global oil prices helped revenues to rise from less than $500 million to tens of billions of dollars, and the country invested into industrial expansion. Further, the nationalization of independent banks rendered much of Iraq's finances under the chairman's control. Evidently, during that time, Saddam slowly began to pull the rug from under al-Bakr's feet. Indeed, not only did Saddam position many of his Takriti relatives in vital positions of power, but he also used his powerful security apparatus to self-aggrandize himself, much like Stalin's rise to power. In 1979, when al-Bakr attempted to unite Syria and Iraq in a move that would have left Saddam effectively powerless, Saddam forced al-Bakr to resign. Seeing the writing on the wall, al-Bakr resigned, and on July 16, 1979, Saddam became president of Iraq. Less than a week later, he called an assembly of the Ba'ath Party. During the meeting, which was infamously televised, a list of 68 names was read out loud, and each person on the list was promptly arrested and removed from the room. Said names would either be shot or found guilty of treason. By early August of 1979, hundreds of Saddam's political foes had been executed, hence tightening Saddam's iron grip. As the new leader of Iraq, Saddam had a good instinct for what the Arab Street demanded. Indeed, following the decline in Egyptian leadership brought about by the trauma of Israel's six-day victory in the 1967 war, the death of the pan-Arabist hero Gamal Abdel Nasser in 1970, and the so-called treacherous drive by his successor, Anwar al-Sadat, to sue for peace with Israel after Iraq's participation in the 1973 war, Saddam positioned himself as the new hero of the Arab world. For example, his ardent support for the Palestinian cause and his friendship with the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat allowed him to paint himself as the defender of Arabism against Jewish or even Persian intruders later on. The same year that Saddam ascended to the presidency, 1979, would prove a pivotal year in human history. Ayatollah Khomeini led a successful Shiite Islamic revolution in Iraq's neighbor, Iran. Saddam, whose political power rested in part upon the support of Iraq's minority Sunni population, worried that developments in Shiite-majority Iran could lead to a similar uprising in Iraq. In response to Khomeini's provocations, on September 22, 1980, Saddam ordered Iraqi forces to invade the oil-rich region of Khuzestan in Iran, and the conflict soon blossomed into an all-out war. Western nations and much of the Arab world laid their support firmly behind Saddam. Finally, in 1988, and after years of intense conflict that left hundreds of thousands dead on both sides, a ceasefire agreement was finally reached, and Saddam declared the war effort to be a victory. In the aftermath of the deadly Iran-Iraq conflict, and seeking a means of revitalizing Iraq's war-ravaged economy and infrastructure, Saddam turned his attention towards Iraq's wealthy neighbor, Kuwait. Using the justification that Kuwait was flooding the oil market and stealing Iraqi oil from bordering oil wells, on August 2, 1990, Saddam ordered the invasion of Kuwait, where the country was quickly occupied and declared as Iraq's 19th province. However, a UN Security Council resolution was promptly passed, imposing economic sanctions on Iraq and setting a deadline by which Iraqi forces must leave Kuwait. When the January 15, 1991 deadline was ignored, a UN coalition force headed by the United States confronted Iraqi forces in Operation Desert Storm, and a mere 6 weeks later, Iraqi forces were driven from Kuwait. A ceasefire agreement was signed, the terms of which included Iraq's dismantling of its chemical weapons program. However, the previously imposed deadly economic sanctions levied against Iraq remained in place. The Gulf Wars resulting economic hardships and Western sanctions further divided an already fractured Iraqi population. During the 90s, various Shiite and Kurdish uprisings occurred, but the rest of the world, fearing another war, Kurdish independence, or the spread of Islamic fundamentalism, did little to nothing to support these rebellions, and they were ultimately crushed by Saddam's increasingly repressive security forces. At the same time, Iraq remained under immense international scrutiny. For example, in 1993, when Iraqi forces violated a no-fly zone imposed by the United Nations and the US, the United States launched a damaging missile strike on Baghdad. These strikes would occur intermittently until February of 2001. In his famous January 2002 State of the Union address, United States President George W. Bush named Iraq as part of his so-called Axis of Evil, along with Iran, and North Korea, and claimed that the country was developing weapons of mass destruction and supporting terrorism. Later that year, UN inspections of suspected weapon sites in Iraq began, but little to no evidence of such programs existed. Despite this, on March 20, 2003, a US-led coalition invaded Iraq. Within weeks, the government and military had been toppled, and on April 9, 2003, Baghdad fell. Saddam, however, managed to elude capture. In the months that followed, an extensive search for Saddam began. While in hiding, Saddam released several audio recordings, in which he denounced Iraq's invaders and called for resistance. Finally, in late 2003, Saddam was found hiding in a small underground bunker near a farmhouse in Tikrit. From there, he was moved to a US base in Baghdad, where he would remain until 2004, when he was officially handed over to the majority Shiite interim Iraqi government to stand trial for his crimes against humanity. During the subsequent trial, Saddam would stand his ground firmly, being unafraid of death. On November 5, 2006, Saddam was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging, despite his appeal to be shot. Later that year, at an Iraqi base in Baghdad, Saddam was hanged. He was subsequently buried in Tikrit, his birthplace, the following day. For the better or the worse, it is undeniable that Saddam had a profound effect on Middle Eastern history. From his origins as a humble agitator to the dictator of Iraq, it remains clear that Saddam's rule preserved stability in the region, where after his death, various terrorist groups such as ISIS and Iran's Revolutionary Guard would wreak havoc on Iraq and its population. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to spread history. This has been the Historiographer, and for now, have a good one.